Hi guys, my name is Robin. Today I'd like to talk to you about portrait photography. Now, when I first started with photography, I only took pictures of bridges and cities and landscapes. And when I started to get requests for family photography, I was pretty terrified. I would think, oh, I don't want to take on this job because what if I suck? What if they hate their pictures? Like, it was something that gave me a lot of anxiety and made me very nervous. So I started off by just taking pictures of family and friends, my dog, my babies. So that's tip number one, would be to practice with close family and friends so that you can actually build your confidence and you get to learn your style and how to edit and how to pose people. The other thing that you need is really good gear. Now, this is what I use. I use an off-camera flash. Now, the reason why I have an off-camera flash and I don't use the flash that comes with the camera is because with an off-camera flash, you can control the light. So I can point it directly at the person, I can point it to the ceiling and have it bounce off the ceiling and create this really soft diffused light. I can bounce it off the wall. With the one that just comes with the camera, you can't really bounce it, right? It just shoots at you. You can't control its power, so you just get what you get. So I never use the flash that's on the camera. Another thing that you need aside from your off-camera flash is a good lens that has a wide aperture. So prime lenses are very inexpensive. You can find them for like $100 used or $150 to $250 brand new. So this one is a 35mm 1.8 aperture lens. I like it because it creates a very creamy, blurry background. Now, because I have a crop sensor camera, I have a Nikon D7500, I use a 35mm prime lens. The 50mm one was just too tight and I had to really step away from the person. But if you have a full frame camera, then the 50mm will work just fine. If you have a crop sensor, I recommend the 35mm one, but that's just my personal preference. And then lastly, you'll also need one of these 5-in-1 diffuser reflector type of thing. I bought this on Amazon, and as you can see, if I open it up right here, it comes in white as well, and the other side is gold. So if I want to give it like warmer tones for my photo for reflecting the sun, which I'll get into later. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the gear here. But on the video below, I will give you a link of where you can find like an affordable flash, this diffuser, and the prime lens. So now that we've covered the basic gear, I'm going to give you the second tip when it comes to portrait photography, and that is to scout your location, okay? Don't show up somewhere that you're not familiar with, because you could show up at this place and maybe it's dirty, maybe it's overcrowded, or the sun is too harsh, or you go in and you quickly take your photos without realizing that if you had just walked 200 meters, there was this beautiful little waterfall with a bridge going over it, right? So you have to make sure that you're very familiar with the location, that you know where all the special spots are, so that when you show up, you know the vision that you have, you know how to work with your location and your environment. Also, when it comes to location, make sure that you communicate very well with your clients. You want to make sure that the location that you choose reflects who they are as a person and the type of photography that they want. So if you're shooting a young urban professional, take them to the city, have skyscrapers as a backdrop, take them to a subway station, something that reflects their personality. If you're shooting a family, take the kids like to a park or like a natural place with lots of trees and flowers. So make sure that you do communicate with your clients so that you're able to put them in the environment that reflects their personality the best. Second thing you want to do is research posing ideas. This is extremely crucial, simply because when you show up, people have no idea what to do. They show up and they will literally say, I don't know how to pose. Like, what do you want me to do? And for girls, all they know how to do is put their hands on their hips and smile or do duck face. And that is the last thing that you want. And they will ask you, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? There hasn't been a single person that I've shot that you show up and they're like, strike 20 poses, this is what I want. Like, They're relying on you to not only be the photographer, but also be the creative director and storyteller. Even though you don't know them, they want you to be able to capture their essence in what they are as a family or as a couple or whatever. So you need to make sure that when you are doing the initial conversations, you're asking them, okay, how many people are in this family or couple or whatever. Then you go on Pinterest, you go on stock images, you follow other Instagrammers that have taken these sorts of pictures before, and you save those ideas. You print them, you save them on your phone so that when you show up, at least you have a guideline of the type of photos that you can give them, some pretty artistic ones. And the thing is, as the shoot is developing, they'll feel more comfortable, and other types of shots will be like arising from them. You don't necessarily have to copy exactly, but at least have a guideline, like, okay, I want you guys here, I want you guys there, I want you throwing her in the air, I want you running. At least you'll have a basic idea of how to pose people, especially if it's a type of photography you've never done before. Tip number 4 is to create those creamy, blurry backgrounds. So this is where your prime lens with a wide aperture will come in extremely handy. Now, the creamier the background, the more your subject is going to stand out. It's what they like to call bokeh. It's a Japanese word, which means out of focus. So the more out of focus the background, your subject just stands out more and it's more highlighted. Now you have to follow 3 steps to create a creamy background. 1 is to set your aperture as wide as possible. So my 35mm lens here goes as wide as 1.8. So the wider it is, the blurrier the background. Secondly, to make it even blurrier is to have distance between your subject and the background. So the more you can separate your subject from the background, having them step forward, the creamier and the blurrier the background is going to be. If they're kind of directly right behind, like the tree's right behind them or a wall's right behind them, then it's not going to be blurry. And finally, number 3, make sure that you're close to your subject or that you're zoomed in on your subject. If you're far away from your subject, no matter how far away they are from the background isn't going to be as blurry. So make sure that you are close to your subject, or if you have a zoom lens, that you're zoomed in on them. Tip number 5 has more to do with how to deal with the sun in certain conditions. So the ideal conditions for photographing outside is when it's overcast, because when it's overcast, there's no harsh sunlight creating these shadows on your subject. When it's overcast, it's just this beautiful, soft, diffused light, which is why it's important to know your location. Because if a family says, I only have time at 2 o'clock, you want to make sure that you pick somewhere where you have like trees or forest or buildings that are going to cast some kind of shadow on your subject. Now, why is the sun a challenge? Well, think about it. If the sun is directly above you, it's going to create these very harsh shadows on the person's face, like the shadow from the nose on the lips, like from the chin to the neck. So anywhere, like it's just going to have shadows, and it's not going to be very flattering for your subject. If the sun is beside them, then this part of their face is going to be overexposed and the other side of the face is going to be in shadows as well. Again, not flattering. If the sun is directly behind them, then it's going to silhouette them. So silhouetting is also a great artistic type of shoot. I've done it with couples. So because it just creates like their silhouettes, their shadows, and it can be very romantic when done properly. But if you actually want to have their face in detail, then you will need your flash. The flash directly pointed at them will create a source of light that will counteract the sun behind them. So that way you can still have the sun with like reflecting on their hair, or if where the sun is positioned, you have the best backdrop, you counteract that by using your off-camera flash. You put it on the hot shoe, you shoot directly at them, and then you'll be able to get their features in. Now, another way to get around the sun is to use your diffuser. So flip this to the white side and use it to diffuse the light. It creates kind of like the overcast conditions. But to use one of these, you need an assistant, obviously, because they're very large and bulky to hold, and you have to be able to shoot and maneuver this, right? So if you have a friend that can just come and help you, maybe you pay them 50 bucks, whatever it is that you're charging or you feel comfortable with, you can always bring an assistant to have you manipulate and maneuver this so that you're properly able to shield the person from the sun, or use its light to bounce it onto the person's face as well. So whatever it is that you choose to do, these things will come in very handy as well. But the only thing is that you are relying on somebody. So if you do have a friend that's willing to help you, then great. Now, when it comes to indoor photography, it is very important to bring your flash that you put on. Now, what you need to do is put this on the hot shoe, lock it in, and you turn it on. Now, when you're doing indoor portrait photography, let's say a client says, I want you to take pictures of me in my office or in my home, you are working with very limited light sources. So you're either working with fluorescent light or with the light that's coming in from the window. And if you're working with fluorescent light, it's not powerful enough and it can be very unflattering. Now, you can always position your client by a window, but then you're limited and kind of stuck to the window. Because what happens is if you have very little light source and you don't have your own camera flash, then you have to increase your ISO. And the more you increase your ISO to prevent that motion blur, the grainier your photo is going to be. And that is very hard to recover post-process. But for example, if you bring your off-camera flash and you bounce it off the ceiling or off the wall or from behind, then it's going to create this beautiful, soft, diffused source of light. Now, the reason why I like to bounce when I'm using my flash, it's because when you use your flash and you shoot directly head on, what happens is that the person is very exposed, but then everything immediately behind them looks dark and in the shadow. So for that reason, try to avoid shooting directly at your subject because it'll create that very ugly, undesired, unnatural effect. So preferably, I like to bounce it off the ceiling. Now, make sure that your ceiling and your walls that you're bouncing off are white or a neutral color, because if they're dark, it's just gonna get absorbed. Like your light is gonna get absorbed, it's not gonna bounce. If it's red, it's gonna tint your light source. The person's gonna look red. So make sure that you're working with white or neutral colored walls or ceilings. So here I'm gonna give you an example of a photo that I took of my dog. One is directly on. This is bounced off the ceiling. And this here is bounced off to the side of the wall. Now that's a great tip if you wanted to make it seem like they're standing by a window and you have like the sun coming in. Another great thing about bringing your flash is that it prevents your shutter speed from dropping below 1/60th of a second. So you're unlikely to get motion blur if you're using a flash. Without the flash, you have to increase your ISO, or your camera is going to automatically decrease your shutter speed to allow for more light to come in, and it could potentially make your subjects look blurry, especially if you're trying to capture them doing something. Another great tip is if somebody, and this I learned and it completely, like I didn't even know about this, but if you have a client that says, I want sunset shots or nighttime shots, and you don't have anywhere to bounce your flash from, and you don't have any fancy gear like strobes, etc., set your aperture really wide so that your camera is able to capture as much light from the environment as possible. But the other tip is to overexpose your photos by 1 or 2 stops. Like take a test shot and overexpose your photos. Because if you don't overexpose, let's say by 1 stop, anything that's in the dark and in the shadows that you're trying to recover post-process in Lightroom is going to be very grainy, because if you're shooting in low light conditions, you have to increase your ISO. So for example, let's say your ISO is like 6400 and there's a bit of digital noise, just a bit, but still manageable. If you're in Lightroom and you're pushing your shadows up so that you can bring out all the details of everything that's in the dark, those parts are going to look horrible. It's going to look very pixelated, very noisy, and it could be practically unusable. By slightly overexposing your photos as you're taking them, it's going to brighten up the areas that are in the shadows. So in post-process, you don't have to do as much recovery, therefore reducing the digital noise. But like I said, take some shots, take some test shots, because the parts that are properly exposed might be a little bit overly exposed. But as long as you don't lose a lot of detail, you can always recover that and fix that in post-process. Some final tips is when you show up, be professional, but be very friendly. You are a stranger to these people and they don't know you. When you show up, they have to reenact these intimate moments or these family moments that have to seem genuine and candid. And having your photo taken in a public space by a total stranger can be very nerve-wracking. There hasn't been a person that hasn't shown up that they're like, oh, I'm really nervous, I don't know what to do if my kids don't behave, or etc, etc. You have to reassure them. You have to say, hey, listen, I got this, these are gonna be great. Ask them questions about them as you're doing the photo shoot to get to know them. People love talking about themselves, asking about their family, how they met, what they do for a living. Evoke those emotions out of them. Get them comfortable. Get them seeing you as a friend, not just a photographer that they're paying. Give them constant positive feedback. So as you're doing the shoot, say, oh my God, you look amazing, you're doing great, this looks so good. It'll get them relaxed, it'll get them happy and in a positive mind frame, and it'll encourage them to keep doing what they're doing, and they're just gonna relax, and they're gonna be more themselves, and you're gonna be able to capture their essence if you just, you know, become their friend in the process. Also, suggest coordinating outfits. Okay, don't have them showing up one wearing red and one wearing yellow. Like, have them have like a same style. So leather jackets or like plaid shirts or red scarves or Converse shoes. Have them wear something that unites them as a family or as a couple. It always creates a more visually pleasing photo when there's a sense of unity and uniformity. And finally, be ready for the unexpected. I shoot aperture priority 80 or 90% of the time because I want my camera to quickly adjust to certain conditions. When you are shooting, especially for example, children or people, they will do something unexpected that is not posed, that could just be the perfect shot. And you want to be ready to capture it. Like, don't just sit there manually mucking with your camera and missing out on moments. Have your camera aperture priority. Keep your eyes open, because maybe while the couple is doing something here that you're posing them for, their child could be over there sniffing a flower or doing something so absolutely adorable that you just want to be able to quickly point and shoot and capture that. Because let me tell you, those candid, unexpected shots are the best ones. To me, I love a genuine moment, a moment that is not posed, that is not expected. Those are typically the best photos that you can take, so be ready for them. Keep your eye open, keep your finger on the trigger, and set your camera an aperture priority for that. Now I want to leave you with this. I know portrait photography can be a challenge and it can be nerve-wracking for the photographer as for the client. You don't want to disappoint people, but just say yes. Just take on the jobs. Show up, be friendly, be professional, be prepared. Do your best. Now, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And the more your style is going to evolve, the more comfortable you're going to be showing up, and you're going to know exactly what to do with people. And the only way to get better is to just take on these new challenges. And like I said, start with your family, with friends, do a couple of free ones, practice, 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 but be confident and watch this video as many times as you need to, take notes, and I promise you that you will kill it. So thank you so much for watching and stay tuned.